Welcome back to the Law&Crime Network. My name is Bob Bianchi. I'll be with you at 3 o'clock. And as you know, we do gavel-to-gavel coverage, not just on one and not just two, but three trials now that we got going on here at the Law&Crime Network. Rosenbaum case is still going on strong for the prosecution. We'll be covering a little bit of that today. And then the new case that we've been covering is Florida versus Grant Amato. Mr. Amato is charged with killing his mother, his father, and his brother, in part because of a $200,000 debt that he had gotten from a foreign cam girl scam that was going on. There she is right there. That's $200,000 worth of trouble for you right there, folks. And then Florida versus Nicole Nachman. This is going to be an insanity defense case. Again, accused of killing her. There she is, a picture of her right there. Her mother and her stepfather. So, you know, another case of just like insanity coming out of there from Florida, if you will, no pun intended, but that will be an insanity defense. But let's get right to it because I need help here at the Law&Crime Network. I can't do this just by myself. Over to my right over here is a monitor, and I see in that monitor the very beautiful face of my hashtag 4041 Gene Rossi, who scored 40 points in one game, 41 points in another one in high school. They were yelling, "Give it to Rossi," folks. I'm not making this up. There's a news article about it. And Gene, my friend, in honor of you, you know I like to do my research. In honor of you, I would like to present the following that we were able to produce at the Law&Crime Network. Let's take a look.
That's awesome.
I would sing happy birthday to you, Gene, but I didn't want to lose the audience. Happy birthday to you, my friend.
Oh, God. You know what would have been more meaningful? If you had a bowl of polenta.
It's funny you should say that. I asked them, is there any way you could get a polenta graphic? And, you know, there's not one out there. But we actually did think about it. I actually gave him a picture of a pizza box with some pizza slices in it, because you probably like a slice or two of pie, right?
I eat way too much pizza.
All right. Well, Gene Rossi, happy birthday to you. Listen, the Mueller thing is going on, Gene.
Yep.
I know you've been watching it. Give me some initial thoughts of what you think. I mean, it's right out there in the open now. You got the Democrats asking questions, got the Republicans making speeches. Is it accomplishing anything?
Well, here's the thing. I'm going to draw a sports analogy. There's no home run. There's no game-winning shot at the buzzer in a basketball game. What you have here is the little bricks in the wall, just like when we were prosecutors. You build a case one brick at a time. If I had a score it now, like the Wimbledon final between Federer and Djokovic, I would say that the Democrats are a little bit ahead, and here's why. They are focusing rightly on the 12 instances of alleged acts of obstruction, and they're getting Mueller to answer yes or no and reading parts of the report. The Republicans are getting a little distracted. Rule 403, off at tangents, unduly prejudicial areas. They're focusing on the deep state and stuff that happened before Mueller. If I had to score it now, the Democrats are a little bit ahead.
Yeah, it was interesting the way they were asking questions. You know, Gene, we actually have a part of Mueller's opening statement, so let's take a look at that.
Let me say one more thing. Over the course of my career, I have seen a number of challenges to our democracy. The Russian government's effort to interfere in our election is among the most serious. And as I said on May 29th, this deserves the attention of every American. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So the report did not conclude that he did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what about total exoneration? Did you actually totally exonerate the president?
No.
Now, in fact, your report expressly states that it does not exonerate the president.
It does.
And your investigation actually found, quote, multiple acts by the president that were capable of exerting undue influence over law enforcement investigations, including the Russian interference and obstruction investigations. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, so Gene, you know, what this seems to me to be is the Democrats have said that most people haven't read that report fully, when I'm sure most citizens don't have the time to be able to do that. So they're basically asking questions in a very direct way, like cross-examination, and getting all that data out that they feel is important. And he's just saying yes, yes, yes to those questions, where the Republicans tend to be asking, I wouldn't even call it asking questions. Some do ask questions, but most are giving speeches.
Right. And I got to add this, because the Law and Crime Network is the best on the planet. I'm giving you a nugget that no other network has. Are you ready? The person sitting to the left of Robert Mueller at the table is Aaron Zebley. I trained him when he was a baby prosecutor, Bob Bianchi. And let me tell you this, the allegation that you got these 18 or 19 angry Democrats, Aaron Zebley was as apolitical as you'll ever find any prosecutor in the world. And he has as much integrity as any prosecutor I ever worked with. So having him at the table, to me, adds tremendous gravitas to the words of Robert Mueller.
You know, Gene, during part of the colloquy that I was listening to on the way into the Law and Crime Network was a discussion about why would you even investigate him if you couldn't prosecute him? What was the sense of having that investigation in the first place then?
Because they wanted to find out if there were crimes committed by the president, who's protected by that Office of Legal Counsel memo, which is total baloney, and people involved in the campaign and his administration. All the people below the president, they could be indicted, and God knows they indicted 32 people, maybe 40 people. We've had a couple of trials now. But the purpose of that was to see if the President of the United States and his underlings in the administration and in the campaign committed crimes. Now, if they found evidence against the president, which I think is clear as a bell in the report, he's protected by the OLC memo while he is in office. And what Mueller said today is that it only protects him while he's in office, and the memo does not protect him from indictment if he is defeated for re-election.
Okay, well, Gene, actually, let's go to a clip of that questioning about whether you can indict a sitting president or the determination that Mueller made with respect to that in the report.
Since you decided under the OLC opinion that you couldn't prosecute a sitting president, meaning President Trump, why did we have all of this investigation of President Trump that the other side is talking about when you knew that you weren't going to prosecute him?
Well, you don't know where the investigation is going to lie, and the OLC opinion itself says that you can continue the investigation even though you are not going to indict the president. Okay,
well, if you're not going to indict the president, then you just continue fishing, and that's my observation.
So there you go with that one, Gene. Why do you say that the OLC memo is bogus with respect to whether you can indict a sitting president?
I'll tell you why. Because it was written in 1973, and at that time, President Nixon was in the crosshairs of the congressional committees and a special prosecutor. And the OLC and the entire Justice Department was incredibly political on the 4th and 5th floors of Main Justice, where I used to work. I used to work on the 4th floor. That memo was totally political because there's nothing in the Constitution that supports it. It's a policy decision. The president can't be bothered while in office by criminal investigations. Clinton v. Jones obviously says civilly you can be charged, but criminally you can't. That memo was political, and it was so political, they wanted to get rid of Spiro Agnew, and they threw him under the bus and said the president's protected by the memo, but not the vice president. And then he was later indicted by the U.S. Attorney in Maryland, and he pleaded guilty to tax charges. So there's nothing in the Constitution to support that memo.
Well, Gene, I mean, I've always wondered about that memo myself because they say no one's above the law, but essentially they're making that above the law. And I wanted to just ask you one question before we get to the obstruction pieces of this. If he doesn't get reelected, well, then the statute is one thing, statute of limitations. But if he gets reelected and that memo is at play, how long is the statute of limitations for these crimes? Is it 5 years?
5 years. So if he gets reelected, he's out of the woods. Because for the campaign finance charges, which I think from the Southern District are a slam dunk, and I have personal knowledge of that investigation. Michael Cohen bit the bullet. Yeah. His boss told him what to do.
Yeah.
How many times, Bob, did you indict the minion and let the boss go away? Never happened.
Yeah, I agree with that completely,
The
Gene.
statute of limitations, I hate to interrupt, the statute of limitations is 5 years. So he wrote a check, Donald Trump did, August of 2017 to pay back Cohen. So he can be indicted up to August of 2022 on the campaign. And the obstruction is also 5 years.
Wow, wow, amazing, amazing. Well, interesting stuff, Gene. Rossi, thanks so much. Now, a big part of this is volume 2, which is the obstruction piece, where Mueller did a very, very interesting thing in his declination, if you will, if you want to call it that. And he actually kind of got called on the rails about what he did here, because he essentially said he could not exonerate the president with regard to 10 instances of potential obstruction. Let's take a listen.
So to recap what we've heard, we have heard today that the president ordered former White House counsel Don McGahn to fire you. The president ordered Don McGahn to then cover that up and create a false paper trail. And now we've heard the president ordered Corey Lewandowski to tell Jeff Sessions to limit your investigation so that you stop investigating the president. I believe a reasonable person looking at these facts could conclude that all 3 elements of the crime of obstruction of justice have been met. And I'd like to ask you, the reason, again, that you did not indict Donald Trump is because of OLC opinion stating that you cannot indict a sitting president, correct?
That is
Could you
correct.
charge the president with a crime after he left office?
Yes.
You believe that you could charge the president of the United States with obstruction of justice after he left office?
Yes.
Ethically, under the ethical standards?
Well, I'm not certain because I haven't looked at the ethical standards, but the OLC opinion says that the prosecutor, while he cannot bring a charge against the sitting president, nonetheless, he can continue the investigation to see if there are any other persons who might be drawn into the conspiracy.
So, Gene, Special Counsel Mueller took a little bit on the chin about why did you upend, was the term being used, the criminal justice system, where your job is to determine whether there's evidence of a crime being committed. You go through this report, you indicate there's 10 instances where you say a crime, you can't say that a crime was committed, but you can't say that one wasn't. Some took umbrage at that approach. Was that a fair way of going about things? When he says, I couldn't exonerate him, is he essentially saying, I think there's enough evidence to go forward? Because in volume 1, you note, he says there is no evidence to go forward. So he's very definitive there, but not on volume 2, which is the obstruction. Thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Robert Mueller. I think he's just a class act, a war hero. His record speaks for itself. I criticize him here. If you're saying that someone did not commit a crime in your report, and he essentially did in volume 1, okay? There's no conspiracy. He didn't say there's no collusion, there's no conspiracy. When you get to volume 2, you either say he didn't commit the crime, okay, of obstruction, or because this is a very special report, tell us yes or no, did he commit obstruction of justice? And put in the memo, he did, but we can't charge him because of the memo. The reason he says that he didn't say that he could be prosecuted for obstruction, the reason he didn't say yes is he didn't want to unfairly tarnish his reputation because he can't defend himself until after he leaves office if he's defeated.
Yeah, I find some flawed logic in that, Gene. That wasn't his job to talk about what would be fair or not fair. His job was to come to a conclusion, and he's managed to get both sides, I believe, upset about the manner in which he went about part 2. Because, I mean, to me, if you read between the lines, he's saying there's significant evidence of obstruction. And Gene, me and you know. I just recently got done with one. The way they throw obstruction charges out in the federal government against some really stretchy conduct or sketchy conduct, if you will, this is like almost a no-brainer, if you will, in terms of how they typically charge an ordinary citizen.
Bob, I've mentioned this so many times, I'm getting tired of saying it. I charged a state prosecutor with obstruction of justice and witness tampering. I was very tough on obstruction and witness tampering. You mess with my witnesses, you mess with my investigation, you are gonna pay.
Gene, real quick, with respect to the firing, or potential firing of Mueller, which apparently at least Don McGahn and I think Corey Lewandowski saved him from doing a calamitous move like that. But does that really make a difference? It's a completed crime once you're attempting to do it. And the argument goes that he's got Article 2 powers and he can fire him for any reason. He could do it for any reason whatsoever. I don't read it that way. I read that you can't exercise any power you have corruptly.
Right. You can, if you serve at the pleasure of somebody and they fire you for no reason, they have the right to do that. And the president could fire any member of his cabinet and any appointed official. But when you do that with a corrupt motive, and he did have it, in my opinion, but here's what he also did. He asked the White House lawyer on multiple occasions, and he asked KT McFarland on one or two occasions to create false documents that would impede an investigation. That's classic obstruction of justice.
Yeah, that is not a good look for sure. Gene Rossi, well, nobody better than you to talk about this. And I know you. I love talking about it. It's your birthday, so we figured we'd give you a whole Mueller segment as a birthday gift to you. All right, guys, we got a lot more on the plate here today at the Law&Crime Network. We're going to go to a quick break, and we'll be right back.